and welcome to the Arsenal Women Arsecast on Arseblog.com with me, your host, Tim Stillman, slightly smug sounding, well, smugger than usual anyway, because I was going to say England are the European champions again, but really I think Arsenal are the European champions again. That's right. Arsenal won Euro 2025. In my opinion, Hannah Hampton, Lucy Bronze, you guys, yeah, well done. You played your part. But Chloe Kelly, Beth Mead, Leslie Russo, Michelle Agyemang, Lotte Woodburn-Moy, you guys, unless you did, I've missed someone there. Leah Williamson, just the captain. Yeah, congratulations to all of those guys. And, I think if you're a fan of the WSL, I appreciate we have a lot of listeners who are not English and cannot and will not really share in that success, which is absolutely fine. But I think for the WSL, hopefully it's really, really good news as well. And we see a continuation of this kind of explosion of popularity. But we'll talk a little bit generally about the Euros and do a little bit of Arsenal chat. And to do that, delighted to welcome back after a month's slog in Switzerland covering the Euros, Jamie Spanger. Jamie, got back less than 12 hours ago and we've got you on the mic here. How are you doing?
Tim, I'm excited to be back doing what I love most. Honestly, was looking forward to this. It's been a long month, an exciting month. I am so sleep deprived, but talking about Arsenal is my bread and butter. I'm very excited to be back.
Well, we'll do that obviously later, and we've got some questions as usual. We'll make this a bit of a mailbag episode. But Jamie, just in terms of, I guess, your experience, both of the Euros in general and your kind of takeaways from it, but also your experience covering it. You know, you were out there with haters doing all the match. That's Haters TV, by the way, not like the haters, the organisation, but doing all the match day -1 stuff, all the post match stuff, all the press conference stuff, lots and lots of games. What was it like covering the tournament?
It was incredible, Tim. Honestly, it was a month of non-stop action. The glamour of a major tournament, I think everyone gets very excited about it. Covering my first ever major tournament, I was very excited and it lived up to the expectation, but it is long. I am very sleep deprived. My body is shutting down. I am ill. But it's basically getting up at 7:30 a.m. We were doing a live show every day, so prepping for that, setting up, and then doing all our content, going to the England Media Centre, whether it be England Media or whether it be match day -1, post-match training, and then going to a game at night. So I think I covered 15 games in the end, basically getting home at 4 a.m. every morning for 28 days. So I'm exhausted. However, it was incredible. Switzerland was incredible. If you're planning on going to Zurich, make sure that you've got enough money in your bank account, because I have never, ever been to a city or a country more expensive than Switzerland. But the tournament was amazing. It was so incredible to be there. I'm so glad I got to go when Switzerland were hosting as well. Them making it to the knockouts, their first ever knockout achievement at a Euros was incredible. The host fans were incredible. The way that Switzerland set up a tournament for a country that doesn't really have the facilities to support a tournament of that size was just remarkable. It was remarkable. Being there when they made the knockouts, I think, was a highlight for me. But the tournament and being able to watch every world-class team in the world, it was incredible. I got to see basically every team in the end. I think the only teams I didn't get to see were Wales. I was actually at Netherlands, France instead of England, Wales, covering that because we thought there was going to be a bit more on the line. But it was incredible being able to watch Spain, Germany, Italy. My grandparents are Italian, so being able to watch Italy in a semi-final was also incredible, albeit the result, but it was Michelle Agyemang and Chloe Kelly, so I won't be complaining too much about it. But yeah, Tim, it was amazing. However, I need 8 hours of sleep more than anything in the world.
Yeah, because I've never really covered a tournament before. When the Euros were in England in 2022, I went to 9 games, but I went as a fan to all of them. All of the work I've done and do around tournaments is all kind of remote research work, bit of podcast work here and there. But I've never really done the months-long slog. But, Jamie, the next tournament is in Brazil. And listen, I've never really fished for that kind of work at tournaments because, I write about Arsenal primarily, so I've never really had to. But someone's got to hire me for Brazil in 2027. Come on, guys.
Give him a call.
But yeah, absolutely. And I think it is worth kind of reflecting on the hosts as well, because I admit I was one of those people that was slightly dubious about it. Is this ambitious enough? But actually, I was quite I say shocked, surprised, like that Switzerland broke the attendance record like before the final. It's kind of an interesting model because all of the like they didn't have like a Wembley final like we had last time, but they had a lot of like good sized venues for pretty much every game, and they pretty much filled them all by the looks of it, which I think is a better look for a tournament. Like I was watching that Switzerland-Spain game, and the atmosphere was absolutely incredible. I really hope there's a legacy there for kind of Swiss women's football as well. And, you know, like that kind of having those like quite, in men's terms, mid-sized stadiums, but having them full all the time. Whereas in England, you know, we used like Manchester City Stadium, which is really, really good facility, but only holds 7,000 people. And obviously like Switzerland is quite an easy country to get around on rail travel. So, I mean, it has to be said for the hosts, a real success. And they've got the bones of a team there that I think, you know, some of those players are going to be playing for them in 10 years easily.
Yeah, honestly, I think Switzerland need to pat themselves on the back as a host nation, not just the squad. I agree, Tim. I think this tournament was the perfect stepping stone for women's football because we didn't try to go too big with the scale of it. 30K stadiums basically on average across the entire country. They were all sold out except for 2 games, which is remarkable. And those 2 games that weren't sold out were pretty much sold out anyway. So it's the perfect stepping stone to say, okay, we go bigger the next time, whoever wins that bid. But Switzerland were amazing, considering, again, the facilities they have are great, but they're not world class. They made them world class for the tournament. For media, it was so excellent. And yeah, the travel was just lush. Those Swiss trains, oh my gosh, I could live on a Swiss train, honestly. Double decker, air conditioned, massive seats for second class. It was remarkable. But I'm with you, Tim. The Swiss team, a very, very young and exciting team coming up that have some really promising talent. Obviously, a lot of them are making big moves. They've got a player that's just signed for Man City. Geraldine Reuteler is now being looked at from Lyon and PSG, and she had a remarkable tournament. And then, of course, Leah Volti made me emotional. I was covering the Switzerland-Norway game, the opener, and that was actually probably my favourite game of the tournament to cover. And it was just watching her captain our nation. I actually got so emotional. And then obviously Frida Mornon was there as well. So yeah, good on Switzerland. It was an amazing tournament. They did such a great job.
And speaking of stepping stones and amazing tournaments, I mean, Michelle Agyemang is the name on everyone's lips, I think. You know, was a bit of a surprise inclusion, even when she was included in the kind of warm-ups. I wasn't sure I was expecting her to make the final squad. I do think Millie Bright's unavailability maybe lent into that, because we know Serena likes to throw Millie Bright up front when things got a bit hectic, and Agyemang took on that role, and just absolutely incredible that she's played 5 games for England now and 6 games for Arsenal. You know, just an absolutely exceptional tournament. She wins Young Player of the Tournament, I think deservedly so. I can't remember whether we have a question on this for the second half or not, but I'm going to ask you what would, and this is I think a hot topic around Arsenal fans, and I've kind of had my say on it. What would you do with Michelle Agyemang next season if you were Arsenal?
Well, I think that had you asked me 2 weeks ago, even after maybe the Sweden equaliser, I would have had a different opinion than I do now. I think, look, Tim, I still think she could value a lot from a season on loan. I really do think there's a lot of merit in her being sent out to another club, because now she's shown that she's a starter for most clubs in the WSL. I truly believe that outside the top 4. And it's really, really valuable for her right now with Alessia Russo and Stina Blackstenius to be getting those playing minutes, because we can see what she can already do. It's just about learning. It's like the first touch and a couple things that she kind of needs to grow into, because she's got the foundations to be the best striker in the world. And I'm not even exaggerating with that. However, I think there's also a point to be made about the fact that Arsenal just need to be a bit hungrier. And I think we've seen over the last 5-6 years, they've been a little bit complacent in terms of, okay, how are we going to contend for winning everything and winning the WSL, winning the league? You look at Chelsea, their depth is just absolutely monstrous, and they've got players that are happy to play their role off the bench. You've got Kat Macario, Sam Kerr's going to be back soon. It'll be interesting what happens there. Aggie Biff-Jones, Myra Ramirez, they all play similar positions. They're all playing in the 9, and they're winning the domestic treble unbeaten in England. So I think for Arsenal right now, you need to be hungry. There is a spot in the squad right now to have Agyemang, Blackstenius and Russo. I think they are all completely different strikers as well. They offer something else to Arsenal that you know, Russo doesn't offer what Agyemang does, and Agyemang doesn't offer what Blackstenius does. They're all very different calibers of strikers, and Arsenal are going into this campaign as champions of Europe. They need to be contending for the WSL. This is the year where it's basically, I think, theirs to win. I think Chelsea have a lot of squad turnover. They've got some aging players as well. I think right now I want to be really, really like greedy and just say there is room for all three of them in this squad, especially with the future of Stina Blackstenius. I don't think it's as long term, it's safe to say, as Russo and Agyemang at Arsenal. So is there room to maybe just say we're just going to see what we can do for a year and play all three of them? But I think that's just me being a greedy fan, because I can also see the perspective of the loan signing.
Yeah, and I don't think you're alone in that perspective at all. And if that were to happen, I wouldn't be complaining or disappointed about it whatsoever. Another thing we haven't touched on yet, like the podcast has, but we haven't got your opinion yet on. Well, I don't think so. On the signing of Olivia Smith, I think maybe the last podcast you were on, I talked a bit about the interest in Olivia Smith, and I felt at that time it was going to be really dragged out. I knew Chelsea were interested. There was stuff in the French press about PSG making bids and Lyon, and I thought, well, there's a lot of competition here. And my information from the absolute get-go was that Liverpool, if you don't offer them £1 million, you're wasting your time, because that's all they're going to take. But Arsenal slapped the money down and they did it. And they did it quite early in the window, whereas their other kind of big world record bids have all been slightly panicked deadline day kind of deals. What's your take on Olivia Smith coming to Arsenal and being the first £1 million women's footballer?
I'm buzzing, Tim. I'm so excited, not just for the caliber of player, I'll get onto that, but just the intent and the hunger in the market is something we've not seen from Arsenal, like you mentioned, over the last few years. We've often seen them slap a big bid on late in the window, or maybe even for Alessia Russo when United weren't realistically going to sell her in a title charge, and then a late bid to Barcelona for Kira Walsh. This is a record-breaking signing for a young player with a high ceiling rather than a ready-made player that's going to provide a quick fix. And I think that's what I'm most excited about with the implementation of Olivia Smith, is that there's already wingers in those positions. We needed a world-class winger because, yes, Chloe Kelly is now signed on a permanent. Caitlin Ford is there. She's going to be at the Asia Cup next year in March for a whole month. Hopefully a whole month at least. Sorry, Arsenal fans. And then obviously Beth Mead as well. Like, we've seen that there needs to be an extra body in that line. Lena Hurtig is obviously no longer with the club. So to sign a young player like Olivia Smith and Arsenal going into this market and saying, we are the champions of Europe, we have the intent to be able to build this club for the future. We don't just want to kind of band-aid the squad as far as we can go. We want to lift the ceiling. And Olivia Smith for Liverpool last season was sensational. Obviously, she got 6 goals in the WSL, 0 assists. However, I think that there needs to be a case to be said that her expected assist was actually a lot higher than her output, because there's no world-class striker on the end of those balls. Her shot creation is actually quite good. So you've put in someone like Alessia Russo, Stina Blackstenius, you got Chloe Kelly in there, Frida Mornham in the 10. That's a player that can serve some of the best players in the WSL. So I'm so excited for this signing. She's so technical and aggressive on the ball, and I think that's exactly what Arsenal need. They need a ceiling raiser in terms of her pace, but she's not just a quick winger with no end product. She's very, very good technically. So Olivia Smith, for such a young age, such a big name player already, you get her in early, you really, really nurture her talent, knowing that she has someone like Beth Mead, Chloe Kelly or Caitlin Ford to kind of learn from, who've been around the game. It's just about Arsenal saying, no Chelsea, no Liverpool, like, we want this player, we're getting this player. And I'm just so pleased that that is the attitude that has finally been adopted.
Yeah, absolutely. She's got, I think you're right in how direct she is, and Arsenal have needed that profile for a while. She's got that Beth Mead thing for me, though, of like just making her own shots.
Yeah.
And, that first thing in her mind being, what can I do for a shot to happen? Whether it's from me or someone else, what do I do to make a shot happen at the end of this? And I think that's really, really exciting. And I also think it's going to be quite interesting because there's 4 wingers there who can play on both sides.
Yeah.
And I think they will. And I think, we've seen Chloe on the left for Arsenal a bit, but I think in the Euros we've seen quite a lot of her on the left to really, really strong effect.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't mind betting we see a little bit more of that next season. I think it's going to be really interesting how those 4 wingers are kind of used and which sides they're used on the most. But a player who is going to go, well, at least temporarily, Rosa Kafaji going on loan to Brighton. I think it was reasonably obvious for most of the second half of last season that she wasn't going to be at Arsenal this season, one way or another. I believe it's really the club that have said we won't entertain a sale, but we'll definitely entertain a loan. That's in line with what she wants. She wanted to go and play. Going to Brighton on loan, obviously Michelle Agyemang went there last season. Dario Vidicic, Australian coach. He's Australian, you're Australian. I used to live in southwest London. You guys all know each other, obviously. What do you make of Brighton for Rosa Kafaji? And particularly, I'm thinking about her learning from someone like Fran Kirby, who I think she's quite similar to.
Yeah, Dario Vidicic, good mate. Good mate. Everyone in Australia knows each other. No, I'm really excited about this. I think that Brighton is a great loan destination purely because Vidicic has known in his past managerial tenures to really do well with breeding young talent. And you look, when he was at Melbourne City, he won the league. He won the A-League at Melbourne City before he came to the WSL. And that was a team where people were really, really doubtful about the talent that they had because they had a lot of aging top level talent. And then they had a lot of young blood that wasn't really proven in a top league. So he, rather than playing the players that had got the most caps, he played the 19, 20, 21-year-olds and they won the season. He said, this is how we're going to go forward. This is the style of football we're going to play using these young players. So that's the way. And then they won the league with it. And then he's gone to Brighton and he's had the luxury of Brighton being very ambitious. This is a club that are starting to really take their women's team seriously. They're backing in. They've gone and signed Fran Kirby. They had Nikita Paris, who's obviously no longer there. But he had those experienced heads kind of play the young talents. And I think we saw it with Michelle Agyemang, right, when she went to Brighton. A lot towards the start of the season, she was played on the wing, so she wasn't just not played at all. He said, okay, we're just going to find a way around it to get you in the squad. And she had some really bright games. I mentioned the game I was at the Amex when they played Manchester United. She came on at the left wing and was sensational for Brighton. She really, really knew what her job was. And I think that's what Vidicic is so good for. So if you look at Rosa Kafaji going into this team, I think you're going into a team with a manager that has previously backed young talent and will continue to do so. And I think it's the perfect environment for Rosa Kafaji to be in because maybe she's not going to be starting every game. You mentioned someone like Fran Kirby, who's one of the best players of all time, playing in that high 10 role. But then you've got a manager as well, and you've got a team as well that aren't going to be contesting for massive titles all the time. So they've got more room to kind of make experiments. And that's what we saw a lot of with Brighton. They changed up their front line. They also like to change formation very often. He doesn't really have a game plan and stick to it. So for Rosa Kafaji, it's going into an environment that's going to help nurture her talent. I think it's a perfect decision from Arsenal to allocate her to Brighton. I think that's a very, very clever move because it's not just, she needs playing time. She needs a manager that's going to play her and teach her. And she's also going to need to work for a spot at Brighton, which is important. I think if she's going to a club where she's going to walk into the starting lineup straight away, it's not as beneficial, but she'll get a lot more playing time than she would at Arsenal. So yeah, I'm really, really happy with this. I think it's a smart move from all parties.
Yeah, definitely. And also I think like Fran, probably not a 90-minute player anymore. So I think there's potentially lots of minutes. So even if Rosa doesn't start, she'd be coming on quite a lot. And yeah, I personally, I'd love for Michelle Agyemang to go back there. I'm not sure, particularly with Nikita Paris gone. I think Paulina Bremer left as well. So potentially got a bit more of a gap. I don't know how open to that they'd be. I know like Everton, for example, are kind of brief because Everton had done this before. They'd taken Jess Park and Aggie Beaver-Jones and Gio as well and taking kind of players on loan, but they're very much briefing that they, understandably, I think they don't really want to do that anymore, that they've got their own money and they don't want to be developing players for other clubs. So I don't know if Brighton would feel the same about taking another player on loan, but I'm with you. I think it's a really good place to go. And like you say, I think Dario Vidicic's kind of tactical diversity as well is, makes this a good move. And they're clearly, Arsenal must be pleased with the work done with Michelle Agyemang as well. So yeah, I think that's one really to keep an eye on, but I think that was one that was basically always going to happen. We will take a break there and we will come back in part 2 with your questions, which were submitted from Blue Sky. We will be back right after this. Okay, welcome back to part 2 of this summer Mailbag episode with your questions submitted from Blue Sky. And Jamie, I'm going to ask the first one, which is from at Economy Dave, but economy with an I. Maybe I've mispronounced that. I don't know. Sorry, Dave. It says Arsenal men always seem to struggle after major tournament summers. Do you feel the fact that England and Mariona went so deep in the tournament will affect the players mentally and physically next season, or do you think we have enough quality and depth to cope with this now? So what do you think about the potential impact of the Euros on the beginning of the season?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because Arsenal men certainly, but Arsenal women after the World Cup came back in 2023 and lost the opening game against Liverpool, fell out of the Champions League. So it's kind of just it's a club thing, but it's just a football thing. I think when you have world-class teams, they often kind of have a bit of a mulling over period, because so many of those world-class players are playing for world-class international teams. So there's always a worry about overload, but I think there's a new layer to it this season, Tim. I don't think it's just like, oh, these players are going to be really tired and they're going to come back on heavy legs. Arsenal have a different point to prove this season. They're coming off the back of a really, really successful 2024-25 campaign. If anyone didn't remember, I'm pretty sure they won the Champions League. So that gives them a little bit more hunger. And I think
we do have to mention that on every single episode, and we will do that.
In case people forgot. Like, you never know. Sometimes I remind people I live with all the time. Yeah, so I think it brings a different kind of dimension to the return of the season, because often players come back from major successes and start seasons very strong. And I also think Arsenal are entering a period now where they've got a nice diversity in terms of international players, where there's a lot of fresh players. Like you look at someone like Norway, Frida Mornum, they got knocked out in the quarterfinals. She's had some time off, comes back into preseason. Then you've got the Australians who haven't played a major tournament. Whereas at the World Cup, it was basically everyone. Olivia Smith comes in fresh. She gets a proper preseason. I think such an issue heading off the back of the 2023 Women's World Cup was there were so many new players that had no time to implement themselves in the squad. Like you had Alessia Russo, who came off the back of making the final with England, straight into Arsenal, straight into the Champions League knockouts. They don't have that little mini tournament now. So it saves a lot of grief. You had Amanda Ilizet, Chloe Lacasse. These are players that were all at the major tournament, whereas now it's a lot of fresh blood that can come in and have their time. Olivia Smith has had her time. Katie McCabe has had her time. So I'm less concerned about it this time around. I think, yes, there is a bit of strife for the England players, but there's enough depth there that I don't think it's going to be that much of an issue. The season does start in just over a month, which is a bit crazy, but Arsenal don't have to worry about that mini tournament. It actually just makes things so much better. It makes things so much less stressful. So I understand the point. However, I think it's going to be it's a more comfy position than it usually is in this time around.
Yeah, of course, Arsenal started with Manchester City last season, and like you say, and they had all those Champions League qualifiers. They don't have any of that. I don't think LCL will be an easy game by any means. However, they've got that before then. They've got, after that, things really pick up with kind of Manchester United away, West Ham away. You've got Man City and quite early as well. But I think there is like a bit of a cushion for that first game, and I do think Arsenal have really got the depth to deal with that. I think the kind of weird thing though is we've got 3 left backs and none of them played in the Euros, so we can't really use that depth there. Do you have a question for me?
I do. I've just actually lost it. But the question was along the lines of we've had a bit of an issue with technicality, and now my blue sky has just absolutely gone off. I'll start with a more general one, and then I'll find my detailed one later. This one is from Biased Arsenal Chicago. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on the plan to make noon on Sundays the new default time for WSL games?
Yeah, and Rose CH91 had a very similar question. How do you feel about the new WSL scheduling plans and how it will affect the further growth of attendances in the WSL for Arsenal? While there may be a positive effect after the Euros, I feel like it might be mitigated by the early kickoffs. I agree. I don't like it. I think the thing is that's tricky about all of this is that it is literally impossible to find a time that suits TV audiences and match-going fans because they are diametrically opposed. What suits TV, people watching on TV, is the fact that they're not out. So that means like kind of unsocial hours, like evenings or earlier in the day. Obviously, Sky as well clearly want to keep a distance from their Premier League coverage. I'm not so sure about that. I kind of think that maybe we're at the stage where we just, I don't know, they'll have a better handle on how it affects numbers. I know Tom Gary reported they want more of a kind of round the grounds feel and for the games to feel a bit more connected. And I think they're kind of aping the format that the Champions League has really taken in the men's game, where on the final day of the group format, there is this kind of around the grounds type feel, and there's this, all of the results are meaningful and they're all interconnected and people hop between them, and that's really for TV audiences. I think for the stadiums, I think it's bad.
Yeah.
I think we saw, for example, the Lyon Champions League semi-final, that being at midday. I think that really hit the attendance. I think quite typically as well, the people who come to, Arsenal and WSL games, they have children that play themselves, and it's harder. If they're playing like Sunday mornings, it's going to be harder to get, even to the Emirates. And we've got to take into account that lots of these WSL grounds are not as accessible as the Emirates. Like getting to Meadow Park at midday would be tough. Getting to Crawley for midday, for Brighton, if Villa are playing at Walsall, although I can't remember whether they've committed to play all their games at Villa Park, but a lot of these grounds, can you imagine trying to get to Leigh Sports Village at like midday on a Sunday? Like, I think you'd have to live in the hotel opposite it for that to work, really. So I think not just an impact on the atmosphere of these games, I do think it's going to have an impact on the attendances. But in terms of like the TV numbers, I don't have as much sight of that. And I do believe that the TV numbers, away from like Arsenal, Chelsea, haven't been great, frankly. And so clearly they're trying to create something with this. Let's have all the games kind of going simultaneously and make it feel a bit more like an event, and maybe people hopping between the games, and rather than, Brighton versus Villa kicks off at 2 p.m. And so clearly there's got to be like a little bit of trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
I think from a match going perspective, it's bad. From a TV perspective, I just don't know. It might well work, but I think we've got to get used to maybe a little bit of trial and error, particularly while there are more games on now, and Sky try these things out with the insight they have that I just don't, quite frankly. Let's kind of stay. Well, no. Let's not stay on that. This one's from L at Mariana AWFC. What was your favourite moment of the Euros? Arsenal related, of course, though it'd be fairly impossible to pick anything else anyway. So what was your one favourite moment of the tournament?
Michelle Agyemang scoring against Sweden. That was definitely my highlight. I would say her equaliser against Italy, but as I mentioned earlier, like it was a bit bruising that Italy lost that semi-final. I moved on very quickly. If it was the Matildas, like if you knew me at the 2023 World Cup after that semi-final, I didn't speak to anyone for at least 7 days. But the Michelle Agyemang goal against Sweden, I think she was so deserving of that goal, because I thought in England's opening game against France, the Lionesses were pretty woeful, to be honest. It was a really poor performance. But when Grace Clinton and Michelle Agyemang came on, they woke up and they played some really good football. The intensity really lifted. I think France were kind of begging to bottle the game at that stage. And it felt like Agyemang was deserving of her moment, because she had already proved that she could change things in the England squad. And for her to get that moment and just kind of say, here I am, I'm on the world stage, this is who I am. The Arsenal fans know me, but the English fans don't know me yet. And this is my ceiling, was really, really exciting. I just think her getting her flowers in terms of the whole tournament. My highlight is just Michelle Agyemang, not even just the goal against Sweden, but she deserves it. And I got to sit down and do an interview with her as well earlier on in the tournament, before she actually played and made her major tournament debut. And she is honestly the most lovely kid. Like, she is absolutely lovely, so humble. Was just speaking about how she's grateful to be in the camp training with these world-class players, and said every day she gets excited that she gets to train alongside Alessia Russo, and now suddenly she's scoring goals in semi-finals of the European Championship. So yeah, Michelle Agyemang's goal against Sweden, but her in general.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I don't know whether it's my place to say this or not, because I don't want to tie this to individuals, because it's not Michelle Agyemang's job. But I think, there have been a lot of conversations, and rightly so, about, women's football and a lack of representation, and England women and a lack of representation, and Arsenal women and a lack of representation. So it feels having like an English player of Ghanaian descent come from Arsenal's academy, come into the England team and do this. And particularly when, again, during this tournament, unfortunately, we've had issues where players have had to deal with racist abuse in the England team, and it's not those players' jobs to solve that. They've gone to the tournament, they've played, they're professionals, they've bloody won it. Like, they've done their job. Like, they don't need to solve all of these problems as well. But I do think it's really important. That those players, and I think we have to mention Jess Carter's performance in the final, which, given that she came out of the team for the semi-final and everything that she went through during that, and dropped an absolute 10 out of 10 performance. I thought that was incredible, and a big moment of the tournament. But I'm going to say my moment of the tournament, I'll separate it from England a little bit, because obviously there's lots of food for English Arsenal fans in this tournament. But for me, I think Leah Walti, you referenced it earlier, Leah Walti kind of having a bit of a tear during the national anthem in the Switzerland-Norway game. I know how hard she worked to be fit for this tournament, and it was by no means was it a given that she was going to be fit for this tournament. She barely trained before that first game properly. She didn't take part in any of the warm-up games. She's had pain in her knees, but I knew she'd play, because I knew it would just be like, this is like absolute, won the Champions League, doing this. Like, if I have to sacrifice my whole career to play these games, that's what I'll do, type thing. And she played, and I think she played brilliantly as well. So I think for me, Leah Walti getting out for that first game, I was so anxious about that. I was thinking, God, like, she can't miss this. That would be so unfair. So for me, I think Leah Walti captaining Switzerland, and on top of being like a literal ambassador for the country, for the tournament and everything. And I'm going to miss her other Instagram account.
So helpful, by the way.
Yeah, with a lot of like practical information, as well as like nice shots of lakes and mountains. So yeah, that's a really, really good one for me. How about this one? This one from Ariel AWFC. You've mentioned the need for a 6 in midfield. Coming off the Leah Walti thing there, which we've had for years now. Given there are so few out there of the level that we need, why do you think the sport has a difficult time cultivating both 6s and left-footed defenders? And I would say Chelsea have had this issue as well. Before they went for Kira Walsh, they were looking at Grace Gioro and like, can we repurpose her? They repurposed Erin Cuthbert. They've never been able to find a left-footed centre-back. What is it about those positions that kind of women's football seems to be struggling to create elite versions of those positions, do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a few things about this. I don't know if there's a direct diagnosis, like you'd need to look into a bit further, but when we talk about investment in facilities in the women's game in the past, it's not always been to a top standard. I think we're setting the path now in 2025 for the next generation of top female footballers to have the facilities and the means to be able to play in any position. I just think it comes to the point where the players that are playing now have grown up in an environment where most of them were playing for boys teams. They didn't have elite level academies to be playing under. And it comes in an environment where not everyone is going to want to play those positions. I really do believe it is just like a lack of facility and a lack of investment. They've not had the quality. So I remember when Steph Catley was coming up through the A-League when she was young, and she was the only left footer really in the A-League. And that's why she was just picked for everything. Like, she was picked for the state level team when she was really, really young. Then she was picked for the Matildas. And a lot of that at the start came from the fact that she was left-footed, because she started her career on the wing and now she's a left bat, and she was always going to be the mainstay in the Matilda squad because there's just such a lack of left-footed players. And that goes into the current game now, but I do think we're seeing a bit of an advancement in that. I think when you look at the younger players coming up through the ranks, there is going to be more of players in those positions purely because there's more access to women playing football. So you've got more players training, you've got more players that are left-footed playing. I think it is going to improve. I don't really have the answer of why there's not enough 6s, because when you look at the elite level game, there's not. Like, Man City have Yui Hasegawa. You look at Man United, they really don't have an out-and-out 6. They've been playing Dominic Janssen there, who's kind of a hybrid centre-back, defensive midfielder. The best teams in the world don't really have a 6. You look at Barcelona, they have Patry, but even again,
repurposed.
the best 6 in the world, but she can play up in the 8 as well. So it's a worldwide issue. It really is. I don't think it's something that is maybe just as a younger player doesn't want to be a left back. Like, I don't really know what the answer is, but I'm not concerned for the future. However, if we're talking present for Arsenal, there is a lack of 6s in the market. There is a few out there that I think are world class. They're gettable with aggression in the market. However, yeah, it's a bit of an epidemic. There's no left-footed defenders in the world, and I really do hope that improves as time goes on.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the 6 because you look at, I mean, Leon have got Damaris, who's probably like one of the real few. Patry was repurposed. Yui Hasegawa was repurposed by Man City. And I think that does happen a bit in men's football. Like, players as they get older drop back. So Pirlo, for example, he dropped back. Alonso dropped back. Mikel Arteta dropped back over time. So we've seen that with Kim Little as well. Really, she's dropped back I think even in men's football, it's a position usually for slightly more experienced players. Again, in the men's squad last season, both of their options in that position were over 30, and the men's team bought a 31-year-old this year. So I do think it's a position more for kind of experienced players. But I think, I don't really know beyond that. I think it might be a question of like repurposing someone either in the existing squad or buying someone and repurposing them. But I think what we can say is that we won the lottery with Leah Volti when we bought her in 7 years ago, because she's one of the few and she stayed with the club. It'd be 8 years by the time her contract ends. So we really won the lottery on that one, and we might have to go and try and win it again. So I think that's a really, really interesting question. As for left footers, I don't really know the answer to that. Maybe it's just a kind of lack of specialised coaching. I had a nibble on that one, so I'm going to ask you this one as well. Bring up the Rio Ferdinand meme, please. I'm generally looking at the Ballon d'Or situation, and it's basically a mess this year. Barca had an outstanding club season, bar the Champions League, because obviously, as people remember, if you don't remember, they lost the Champions League final to Arsenal, who won the Champions League. Arsenal are European champions, yes, thanks for bringing that up again, but nothing domestic. And Chelsea had the treble and unbeaten league record. I was hoping Mariona would have a great women's Euros, but who wins? And that's from Seri X Me. I mean, Michael Cox wrote a really good piece in The Athletic today about how, and I think he wrote one after the last World Cup, kind of saying, actually, you're seeing women's football like it's less about individuals now. It's less about Marta going and winning things all on her own, or someone like that, or someone like Megan Rapinoe, or like you're getting fewer stars and more systems. What do you make of the Ballon d'Or situation? Because this is going to be a year where like an Arsenal player is going to podium at minimum, I think. It's just a question of who.
I am really excited because I think it's the first time with the women's Ballon d'Or, maybe 2022 as well, where we weren't convinced that we already knew who it was. Like last season, it was boring. When Bonmati won, we all knew. The season before that was boring. So I think it's the one year where maybe it's a little bit of question. I think it's a 3-horse race, and I think there's 2 Arsenal players involved, and I really do believe that. I think Alexia Putellas, 27 goals for Barcelona. I think it was 21 assists, which is remarkable. That's across all competitions, and obviously won the domestics with Barcelona. But the Champions League final, she was poor. And then the Euro, she was incredible during the group stages. 3 goals and 4 assists for a tournament is remarkable, but she was nowhere in the knockout. She really had a poor knockout tournament. And then you've got someone like Bonmati that I don't know how she won player of the tournament. I really don't understand that at all. She had a good game against Switzerland and a good game against Germany. So that was a bit baffling to me. I don't think she should be in the running, but again, you've won player of the tournament. I think the other 2 players have to be Mariona and Alessia Russo. Mariona, in terms of goals and assists, not as much as Putellas, but she's won the Champions League. Again, I was relying on the Euros. I thought if she had a good Euros campaign, I think that she had the Ballon d'Or in her cabinet already, but she wasn't great until the final. She really did struggle. I think she was played out on the right wing by Tome, and that didn't suit her. She was almost like beaten for pace, and obviously we've seen how good she is in the central areas. And in the final, she was inverting almost to kind of overload the English midfield, so it allowed her to play with more freedom. And then when Putellas came off, she went centrally, and that was when she played her best football. If Spain had won that game and she'd scored, I again think Mariona Caldente deserves a Ballon d'Or. But then you've got the question of Alessia Russo. And I personally don't believe that a player that scores just 12 goals in a league season should win the Ballon d'Or. But 19 goals for Arsenal in the season. I think, how many assists was it? 11 assists. European champion for both England and Arsenal. And she scored the goal to equalise in the Euros final. So I definitely think Russo's a shout. I think Caldente deserves it because to basically lead a team to the Champions League the way she did Arsenal is absolutely remarkable. And we talk about the lack of stars. She was the star for Arsenal during that Champions League campaign. Her final wasn't her best work, but the Champions League campaign was absolutely remarkable. I've never seen a player do that before. Like, she took the underdogs to the title. So Mariona, I think, deserves it. But then you look at 2022 and it's like, clearly, does international success matter that much? Because Alexia Putellas won the Ballon d'Or that year when Beth Mead was phenomenal at the Euros and she obviously came second. So I think I'm being biased when I think Mariona deserves it, but I don't know. I think it could be any of the three. I don't predict it to be anyone outside the three. Chelsea didn't have an outstanding player. I thought they were all just very, very exceptional as a whole, and their Champions League campaign was a bit of a mess in the end. They had a bit of an easy road to the semi-final and then blew it. So I don't think they have anyone up for the chance there, Tim. But who do you think?
Yeah, I think I think there are going to be like 4 or 5 Arsenal players in the top 10. I think Chloe Kelly will get in the top 10. I think Leah Williamson will, and I think she has to come into the conversation. Captaining England, I think she had a superb tournament, brilliant in the Champions League final. I think of the Arsenal players, Russo might have the best chance just because I think she was second top scorer in the Champions League, but she was voted into the Champions League and the Euros team of the tournament. Which I think gives her a chance. I mean, talking about like a lack of maybe individual stars, Chloe Kelly got in the team of the tournament. She didn't start a game.
Yeah.
Michelle Agyemang won Young Player of the Tournament and she didn't start a game. So I think it's getting harder and harder actually to kind of pin down to an individual. I suspect that Russo's got the best chance. If I was going to put money on it, I reckon maybe Bonmati or Alexia will get it, and then we'll have like Russo second and Mariona third, and maybe like Chloe Kelly in fourth and Leah Williamson in sixth. Like, do you know what I mean? I've just got a feeling we'll have a number of high placed players, but maybe I don't know. Like, Russo could win it. And
that would be so good, Tim.
It would annoy a lot of people on the internet as well.
Which is so many people. It honestly just I would be like doom scrolling on social media for hours and hours and hours. Just Manchester United fans, just please inject it into my veins.
Do you have a question for me? Maybe we'll do one more each.
I have one from NDMW. We touched on this very earlier about the wingers, but who do you think plays the most minutes on the left wing next season out of Chloe Kelly, Olivia Smith, Beth Mead, and adding Ford into the equation? Do you anticipate Renee's usage of the 4 wingers to be fairly even, at least for the first half of the season, or expect a preferred big name pairing to emerge?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think we'll see fairly even usage of all 4 of them. Like, Renee certainly settled, on Chloe Kelly and Caitlin Ford towards the end of last season. But I mean, you can see Beth Mead's impact. I think Beth Mead made a big impact in some of the games she came on in the Euros, particularly against Sweden. Like, if you kind of freeze frame Agyemang's goals in the Euros, Beth Mead is there creating a bit of a nuisance of herself, winning the penalty against Italy. Like, she gave England more box presence, and so I would not rule her out one bit. I think at the start, definitely Caitlin, because she hasn't been to the Euros as well. So I think Olivia Smith might be introduced reasonably slowly, but I mean, she'll still... Basically, I think all 4 of them, when they're fit, will play in every game. It's just a case of who starts.
Yeah.
But I am quite interested by the Chloe Kelly on the left thing, because I think Olivia Smith played much better on the right for Liverpool last season. But maybe that's just something about the way Liverpool are set up rather than Olivia Smith herself. But I wouldn't mind betting that Chloe Kelly plays quite a bit on the left wing next season, and we'll see lots of switching in games. I'm really excited by it, actually, because I just think for so long we haven't had this, and I think we've overplayed players like Caitlin and Beth. in the past as well, and I think that's led to some injuries for them. Caitlin's bit. I mean, really, Beth's only had that one injury, that ACL. I think it's incredible that she's had nothing since then. Touch wood. And Caitlin's had like the odd hamstring injury, but we've been quite blessed with the general durability of those players. But I don't think you can take that for granted forever. I am going to ask you this one about another tournament Arsenal are in January next year, and this is from House517. I believe you previously commented on how seriously Arsenal would take the Champions Cup tournament against Gotham in January. With Gotham in January. Now looks like it's going to be sandwiched between Chelsea and City league games. Does that alter your perspective on how Arsenal might approach this competition? I have to say, I'm slightly annoyed that that's happened. I think that was probably avoidable. However, I do think the WSL were trying to get those games away from Champions League group stages. So maybe there's January. There's just a limit on what they could do. But yeah, how do you feel with Chelsea and City kind of either side of that tournament? And I still don't think we know exactly where it's going to be as well. How do you think that impacts Arsenal's approach to it?
Yeah, I think it does. I think Arsenal are in a position this season where they want to be, like I said, they want to be challenging for the WSL. There's every way that they should and can win it, given the fact that Chelsea's reign surely has to end soon. Like, I'm getting sick and tired of watching it now. Like, we're getting Farmers League allegations over here, guys. It's time to step in. So yeah, those are two massive games. I think Man City will definitely get a bit of a kick this season because they need to rewrite the wrongs of last campaign. Obviously, they had some awful injuries and some really bad luck there, but they've got a new manager. They need a point to prove. They've gotten some good players in this window already, with like Sydney Lohman example. So yeah, I think those are two games where it will probably be the top three. I think United's time is maybe they're going to push on, but I don't see it. So these are the games, right? And yes, you've got this new competition. I think we said a bit earlier, they'll take it as seriously as they can, but I think it's just situation dependent going into this game. How many players are fit? Who's available? What's the depth looking like at that time? But then again, I think we're in a better position this season than we were last season in order to challenge with the squad depth across all those competitions. Because, Tim, you mentioned it, we were very lucky with injuries last season with that Champions League campaign. Like, all of our key players were fit and ready to play. We might not have that again. Football works in many different ways. You might not have everyone available. So I think it's situational. It'll be assessed heading into it. I don't see Arsenal going into that and saying, oh, we don't want to win, we don't care. I think that they can win without putting the best possible starting 11 in there as well. Gotham are a great team, but Arsenal's depth is getting more and more impressive. So it's situational. I don't see them putting everything on the line for it, given the fact that Chelsea and City are massive games. However, I still think that they're going to show up with some real hunger. And why wouldn't you want to win it? It's not many games to play. It's a trophy. So yeah, we'll see.
Do you have a question for me to finish?
Yeah, I do actually. I have a bit of a finish off one. Give me 1 second. Okay, final question, Tim. This one's from Liam Underwood. He asks, thoughts on the Arsenal players going up a level at the Women's Euros? I guess, Tim, what have you thought about the fact of like this turnover of this squad? We've always seen Arsenal being a team that like fields world-class players, but it feels like at the Euros, essentially, as you said at the start of the episode, Arsenal won the Euros. It felt like there's been a dramatic shift, Tim.
Yeah, this is something I'm really enthused about. I think there is a positive cycle in terms of, I think England winning the Euros in 2022 probably helped Arsenal a bit in the Champions League this time. I think Arsenal winning the Champions League helped England a bit in the Euros. Not saying it's a main factor, but I think it was a factor. And I think, ultimately we've got 5 players who won the Champions League and the Euros 2 months apart. First of all, the hunger that gives you, like the hunger those players had when it would have been, I think, reasonably easy to go, I won the Champions League, done the Euros before, but to go and do it again, I think seriously impressive. To play essentially Barcelona again in the final, more or less. And I think that says something, potentially very exciting about repeatability. But also, I think just having that experience of winning, which, and listen, we've done a couple, I know, it's not the biggest trophy on the line, but we've done like a couple of Conti Cup finals. Essentially, these players, a lot of them, the English players, they've won their last 4 finals now in the space of 2 years. And I think that says something. Where obviously the league is a different beast compared to like a cup competition. I'm really excited about it. I think the fact we don't have European qualifiers is massive. I think that's been a real drag in some summers, particularly 2 years ago. I think it was just the like a total nightmare scenario to have to play those games and then lose them. I destroyed that season completely and utterly. And then last season, we make a bad start and, have to change manager. I think we're in really good shape and we've got signings done pretty early. I kind of think the women might be in a similar place to the men, that they might do one more, but not necessarily in like a massive rush. But like they've got their main signing in, Olivia Smith. That was their big target of the summer, and they got it done quite early. I think we're in such a strong position to go and attack this season, and with all of that confidence flowing around, I think the amount of rest the players will have is kind of fine as well. It's 5 weeks to the first game. I think we should have pretty much a full squad to start with. So for me, as long as we don't have like what we had a couple of years ago, where we had like 4 ACLs in one season, I just think we're in such a strong position. And I really think some of those players coming back, some of those players are coming back and like, their most recent experiences of winning a Champions League final and winning a Euros final. And I think that's just going to be massive. I really do. And I expect Arsenal to challenge every year, but I really expect it this year. And I think that the fan base is really hungry for it. I think the club's hungry for it as well. I think they realise that it's about bloody time, quite frankly. So yeah, I'm really excited about this season, and I think the manager's in a really strong position as well. I think that really helps. That wasn't the case last season, quite frankly. So yeah, what do you reckon?
I think it's exactly that. I think that these are players, and I want to point out Chloe Kelly again because we've almost highlighted every player and we've spoken a bit about her, but her journey over the last 6 months, I think, really does epitomise the upwards trajectory that Arsenal Football Club are on. Because 6 months ago, she spoke about the fact that she wanted to quit football. She didn't want to play the game anymore. She was hating her job and she was in a dark place. And then she kind of gets thrown this lifeline from Arsenal. She arrives on deadline day and she gets dropped from the England squad. And I think something that really summed up Chloe Kelly and sums up this club right now is when she ran over to Serena Wiegman after the full-time whistle and was just absolutely elated, tears in her eyes. And she said, like, this is a manager. I want to thank her for giving me a chance. And we see so often in football when a player gets dropped from the squad, there's not always the hunger that Chloe Kelly's shown. And she has shown everyone that she has it in her. And she's proved so many people wrong because she just wants to love football. And when she's loving football, that is when she plays her best game. And that is exactly what's happening at Arsenal right now. These players are back to enjoying the game again. And those foundations of a club that are backing in their women's team, there's obviously more aggression in the market with investment. And Olivia Smith is a prime example of that. But the players right now are playing like they love football and they're showcasing that on the world's biggest stage. And the players that performed at the Euros, not just the England players, you mentioned Leah Volti, Frida Mornham had a good tournament with Norway as well in the end, towards the latter stages, the group stages at least. Like, these are footballers. Stina Blackstenius was exceptional for Sweden. They're showcasing what they can do on the biggest stage in Europe. They're coming in to the domestic season with a love for football, but also the form to be in good form heading into the season. I think this is a team right now that are going to be firing on all cylinders. They're going to be hungry because they've proven to themselves, not just everyone else, that they can do it. They've done it. They've won the Champions League. They've got that backing. They've got Renee Slegers right now, who's clearly working magic on the pitch, off the pitch. So yeah, I'm very excited for the season ahead. I think this is the best place this club has been in a while. So yeah, let it happen.
Yeah, Arsenal owned this Euros. Like, name me a club who came close to having the sort of, and obviously Arsenal don't win anything for that. They've got to go out together and put that together. But yeah, I think it's hugely exciting, and yeah, Chloe Kelly's kind of thanks for writing me off. I'm grateful. Great mic drop. I mean, when she said thanks, I think she said thanks to the people that wrote. I kind of think that was for an audience of one.
Yeah.
And of course, Arsenal finished the season at Anfield away at Liverpool, where Gareth Taylor might be manager. So
very exciting.
Maybe she get to lift the trophy there. That would be very nice. But anyway, that we'll talk about that in May 2026 when that happens. But for now, Jamie, thanks so much.
Tim, it's great to be back. Let's get started again.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great to be back. I'm about to go away for a couple of weeks, and I'm going to sit by the pool and do very, very little. So obviously, I'm not taking any microphones or laptops with me, so there'll be no podcast in the intervening couple of weeks, but we'll come back probably around mid-August with something. We'll have probably signed another 4 players by then, won another European trophy somehow, somewhere. So we'll talk about all of that presently, but thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.